On a warm spring evening in May of 1993, the quiet, unassuming town of West Memphis, Arkansas, was thrust into a nightmare. What began as a search for three missing 8-year-old boys quickly devolved into a horrific discovery, a sensationalized trial, and a profound miscarriage of justice that continues to haunt the American legal system. This is the story of the West Memphis Three. Three teenagers, seemingly scapegoated for a brutal crime, and the enduring question of who truly murdered the boys of Robin Hood Hills. Our story begins with the victims, Steve Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore. They were just 8 years old, best friends, living lives of innocent play, riding bikes, and exploring the woods around their homes. On May 5th, 1993, the three boys set off on their bicycles to play in a wooded area known as Robin Hood Hills, a common haunt for local children. When they didn't return home for dinner, their parents, initially unconcerned, soon grew frantic as dusk turned to darkness. A desperate search began involving family, neighbors, and local law enforcement, combing the familiar woods in growing panic. The search culminated in a horrifying discovery the very next day, May 6th. The boys' naked bodies were found in a muddy ditch in the same wooded area. The scene was utterly depraved. The boys had been hogtied, their ankles tied to their wrists behind their backs, a chilling detail. Their bodies showed signs of severe blunt force trauma, and most disturbingly, they had been sexually mutilated. The official cause of death was drowning. The brutality of the murders sent shockwaves through the small, devout community, demanding immediate answers and swift justice. The early 1990s were gripped by a pervasive satanic panic in America, a widespread fear of occult cults and ritualistic child abuse, often fueled by sensational media reports and unsubstantiated claims. This cultural paranoia tragically influenced the West Memphis investigation from the outset. Police and prosecutors, seemingly eager to find a quick explanation for such a monstrous crime, almost immediately focused on a group of teenagers who stood out from the conservative town's norms. These were Damien Echols, 18, Jason Baldwin, 16, and Jessie Misskelley Jr., 17. They listened to heavy metal music, dressed in black, and read books on paganism and the occult. Damien Echols, in particular, had a strong interest in Wicca and a defiant, rebellious demeanor that made him an easy target for suspicion in a community quick to condemn anything perceived as evil or different. The narrative that quickly took hold was that these devil worshippers had brutally sacrificed the three innocent boys as part of a satanic ritual. The linchpin of the prosecution's case became Jessie Misskelley Jr., who had an IQ of 72, borderline intellectual disability, was subjected to an aggressive, lengthy interrogation by police without his parents or a lawyer present. After hours of questioning, he eventually produced a convoluted confession, riddled with inconsistencies and factual inaccuracies that contradicted the known crime scene details. He later recanted this confession, stating it was coerced and made under duress. Despite its unreliability, this confession became the primary piece of evidence used to implicate all three teenagers. The trials began in 1994. Jessie Misskelley Jr. was tried separately, and largely based on his own unreliable and recanted confession, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment plus 40 years. In a subsequent joint trial, Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin were tried together. The prosecution lacked any direct physical evidence linking them to the crime scene or the victims. Instead, they relied heavily on Jessie Misskelley's testimony, even though his actual confession was not allowed as direct. Evidence against Echols and Baldwin, due to legal technicalities, the fact of his conviction and his subsequent brief, limited, consistent statements regarding who was present at the crime were used combined with dubious, expert testimony about occult rituals. This expert claimed the murders bore hallmarks of a satanic ritual, citing the boys' hogtied positions and the supposed mutilations, despite no actual evidence of satanic symbols or rituals at the scene. Based on this highly circumstantial and emotionally charged case, Damien Echols was sentenced to death and Jason Baldwin to life imprisonment. The convictions immediately sparked outrage among many who followed the case. Critics pointed to the glaring lack of physical evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints, no fibers, no blood connecting Echols, Baldwin, or Misskelley to the victims or the crime scene. The satanic evidence was largely discredited by later, more informed perspectives. Defense experts argued the supposed sexual mutilations to be postmortem injuries caused by animal scavenging, a detail consistent with the bodies being left in the woods. Witnesses whose testimony was used against the teenagers were often unreliable or seemed to have been pressured, and some even recanted later. This profound injustice ignited a massive grassroots movement. Pro bono legal teams took up their cause, tirelessly fighting for appeals and new trials. High-profile celebrities, including musicians like Eddie Vedder and Henry Rollins, and actors like Johnny Depp and directors like Peter Jackson, lent their voices and financial support to the cause. Believing firmly in the innocence of the West Memphis Three, documentaries like Paradise Lost brought the details of the case to a global audience, highlighting the shocking flaws in the original investigation and trial. Years of appeals followed, exhausting every legal avenue. Then a crucial breakthrough emerged with advancements in forensic science. DNA testing applied to evidence collected at the crime scene in the early 90s yielded astonishing results. Hairs and DNA material were found on some of the ligatures used to tie the victims and on debris from the crime scene that did not belong to Echols, Baldwin, or Misskelley. Crucially, some of this DNA was identified as belonging to Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of victim Steve Branch, and another belonged to John Mark Byers, the stepfather of victim Christopher Byers. While this DNA evidence didn't definitively prove who committed the murders, it strongly indicated that individuals other than the West Memphis Three were present at the crime scene, directly contradicting the prosecution's narrative that Echols, Baldwin, and Misskelley were the sole perpetrators. Faced with this overwhelming new evidence, the state of Arkansas, rather than facing a potentially humiliating retrial and risking the complete exoneration of the men, offered a highly unusual deal. In August 2011, after 18 years in prison, Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie Misskelley Jr. accepted an Alford plea. This plea allowed them to maintain their innocence, while simultaneously acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. It was a legal maneuver that granted them immediate freedom, but technically left their convictions on their records. For the families of the victims, it brought no proper closure, and for many observers, it was a bitter compromise that still failed to identify the actual killer. The release of the West Memphis Three ignited celebrations among their supporters, but left a lingering, agonizing question hanging over the town of West Memphis. If not them, then who? attention has largely shifted to Terry Hobbs, whose DNA was found at the scene and who had a history of violence. Other individuals connected to the victims or the initial investigation have also faced renewed scrutiny. Despite fresh DNA evidence, extensive reinvestigations, and decades of public outcry, no other arrests have ever been made in the case. The story of the West Memphis Three stands as a chilling testament to the dangers of tunnel vision in criminal investigations, the corrupting influence of public hysteria, and the devastating consequences of a flawed justice system. 3 lives were irrevocably shattered, and the true perpetrator of the brutal Robin Hood Hills murders remains at large, a shadow lingering over a town forever marked by unspeakable tragedy. The children of West Memphis, Steve Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore, still await true justice, a silent plea echoing from the depths of Robin Hood Hills.